The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Compound in Coronado, California. Among the dozens of trainees struggling through Hell Week, one figure moved differently than the rest. While others stumbled and gasped for air, Marcus Chen glided through each obstacle with an almost supernatural ease that made even the instructors take notice. Marcus had arrived at Bud/S training with no fanfare, no letters of recommendation from high-ranking officials, and certainly no family military legacy to lean on. His application folder was surprisingly thin, just basic information about a quiet kid from rural Montana who had worked at his family's hunting lodge before enlisting. What the folder didn't reveal was the extraordinary gift that had been quietly developing in the mountains and forests of Big Sky country. Growing up on the Chen family's remote hunting lodge, Marcus had learned to shoot before he could properly tie his shoes. His grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had taught him that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about becoming one with the environment, reading wind patterns like poetry, and understanding the heartbeat of the earth itself. By age 12, Marcus could hit a pine cone at 800 yards with his grandfather's old hunting rifle. By 16, he was guiding trophy hunters who traveled from around the world, consistently helping them make shots that other guides said were impossible. The instructors at Bud/S noticed something unusual about Marcus during the marksmanship portions of training. While other candidates struggled with the standard-issue rifles, Marcus seemed to make the weapons dance in his hands. His shots didn't just hit the target. They landed exactly where he intended them to, every single time, regardless of weather conditions, lighting, or the chaos happening around him. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran who had seen thousands of candidates come through training, pulled Marcus aside after a particularly impressive shooting demonstration. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, son?" he asked, genuinely curious about the young trainee who had just put 10 rounds through the same hole at 500 yards in a crosswind that was giving everyone else trouble. Marcus shrugged, his typical response to attention. "Just grew up doing it, Chief. My grandpa always said the rifle knows where it wants to go. You just have to listen to it." Rodriguez had heard a lot of explanations for good marksmanship over the years, but this was different. This wasn't just good shooting. This was something approaching artistry. He made a note in Marcus's file that would eventually make its way up the chain of command to some very interested people. As Hell Week progressed, Marcus's reputation grew quietly among his fellow candidates. While others collapsed from exhaustion, he seemed to draw energy from the challenges. During the surf torture sessions when trainees were forced to lie in the frigid Pacific Ocean until their lips turned blue and their bodies shook uncontrollably, Marcus remained calm and focused. His fellow trainees began to realize that they were training alongside someone extraordinary. The log PT sessions revealed another dimension of Marcus's abilities. While most candidates struggled under the weight of the heavy logs during team exercises, Marcus seemed to anticipate exactly where his teammates would move and how much support they would need. He positioned himself perfectly to bear the maximum load at the exact moments when others were weakening. It wasn't just physical strength. It was an almost supernatural awareness of his environment and the people around him. During the night navigation exercises in the mountains outside San Diego, Marcus's abilities became even more apparent. While other candidates got lost in the darkness and struggled to find their way to the checkpoint markers, Marcus moved through the terrain as if he could see in the dark. He arrived at each checkpoint ahead of schedule, often helping lost teammates find their way back to the correct route. Instructor Lieutenant Commander Hayes began documenting Marcus's performance for reasons that went beyond normal training assessments. In his 25 years of military service, including multiple deployments with special operations units, he had never seen anything quite like what this quiet kid from Montana was demonstrating. Hayes had worked with some of the best snipers in the military, men who had legendary reputations and confirmed kills that numbered in the hundreds. But Marcus was operating on a different level entirely. The psychological evaluations during Bud/S painted an interesting picture of Marcus Chen. He scored off the charts on spatial reasoning and visual processing tests. His ability to calculate distance, wind speed, and bullet drop seemed to happen at an almost subconscious level. The military psychologists noted that he displayed characteristics they had only seen in a handful of individuals throughout their careers. A combination of natural talent, environmental awareness, and emotional control that created the perfect foundation for what they termed exceptional operational capability. During one memorable exercise, Marcus's team was tasked with a long-range reconnaissance mission in the desert training area outside of Yuma, Arizona. The team had been inserted by helicopter and given 72 hours to reach a designated observation point, gather intelligence on simulated enemy positions, and report back without being detected by the opposing force units that were actively hunting them. While his teammates struggled with the heat and the difficulty of moving undetected across the open desert terrain, Marcus seemed to thrive in the environment. He led them along routes that avoided the patrol patterns of the opposing forces, found water sources that weren't marked on any map, and identified covered positions that provided perfect observation points while remaining invisible to enemy searchers. On the second night of the exercise, Marcus spotted something that changed everything. Through his scope, nearly 2 miles away, he observed what appeared to be a real threat, not part of the training exercise. A group of armed individuals had crossed the border and were moving through the training area, completely unaware that they had wandered into a military exercise zone. Without breaking radio silence or alerting his teammates to the potential danger, Marcus made a decision that would later be studied in military academies. He stalked the unknown group for 6 hours, moving parallel to their route and gathering detailed intelligence about their numbers, weapons, and intentions. His observations revealed that the group was likely involved in human trafficking, forcing a group of frightened civilians to carry heavy packs across the dangerous desert terrain. Marcus managed to alert the proper authorities while maintaining his team's mission security. Border Patrol and local law enforcement were able to intercept the traffickers and rescue the victims, all while the training exercise continued without interruption. The entire incident was handled so smoothly that most of Marcus's teammates didn't even realize what had happened until weeks later. The incident report that made its way up the chain of command contained details that impressed even seasoned special operations commanders. Marcus had demonstrated not just exceptional marksmanship and fieldcraft, but also the judgment and decision-making ability that separated truly elite operators from merely skilled soldiers. He had identified a real-world threat, developed and executed a reconnaissance plan, and coordinated with multiple agencies to resolve the situation, all while maintaining operational security for his training mission. As Bud/S training moved into its final phases, Marcus's reputation had spread beyond the immediate training cadre. Senior officers from various special operations units began finding excuses to observe training exercises when Marcus was participating. Word had leaked out about the quiet trainee who was demonstrating abilities that defied easy explanation. The graduation ceremony for Bud/S Class 247 was attended by more senior officers than usual. Among the families and friends gathered to celebrate the new SEALs were several individuals in civilian clothes whose presence suggested that Marcus Chen's military career was about to take a very different direction than most of his classmates. As Marcus stood at attention during the ceremony receiving his SEAL trident along with the other successful candidates, he had no idea that his name was already being discussed in classified briefings at the highest levels of Special Operations Command. The quiet kid from Montana who just wanted to serve his country was about to become something that existed more in legend than reality. A ghost who could reach out and touch targets that others couldn't even see. After graduation, while most of his classmates received orders to SEAL teams on the East or West Coast, Marcus was quietly assigned to a unit that didn't appear on any official organizational charts. His orders were hand-delivered by a senior chief who simply told him to report to a specific building at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado at 0600 hours the following Monday, and to tell no one about the assignment. The building turned out to be unmarked and unremarkable from the outside. Inside, Marcus found himself in a briefing room with a dozen other individuals, all clearly special operations personnel, but none wearing any unit insignia or rank indicators that he recognized. The briefing officer, a man who introduced himself only as Colonel Smith, explained that Marcus had been selected for a program that would push his abilities to their absolute limits. The program, he learned, was designed to develop operators who could conduct missions that conventional special operations forces couldn't accomplish. These weren't just difficult missions. They were missions that required capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. The selection process had identified individuals who possessed natural gifts that could be enhanced through specialized training to create operators who could accomplish the impossible. Marcus's first assignment was to a training facility that existed in no official records, located in a remote area of Nevada that was so classified that even the GPS coordinates were considered state secrets. For the next 6 months, he would train with instructors who had legendary reputations in the special operations community, learning techniques that were never written down in any manual, and skills that were passed from master to student in an unbroken chain that stretched back to the earliest days of warfare. The training began before dawn, each day with meditation and breathing exercises designed to enhance his natural awareness and control. Marcus learned to slow his heart rate at will, to control his breathing to the point where he could remain motionless for hours without detection, and to extend his natural shooting abilities to ranges and conditions that most snipers would consider impossible. His instructors were men whose names appeared in no official records, but whose exploits were whispered about in special operations circles around the world. They taught him to read environmental conditions with scientific precision, to calculate ballistic solutions in his head for shots that required computer modeling, and to move through hostile territory with such stealth that he became effectively invisible to even the most sophisticated detection systems. By the end of the 6-month program, Marcus Chen had been transformed from an exceptional SEAL into something altogether different. He could make confirmed kills at ranges that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible with current technology. He could infiltrate and exfiltrate target areas without leaving any trace of his presence. Most importantly, he had developed the psychological profile that would allow him to operate alone for extended periods in the most hostile environments on Earth. His graduation from the program was marked not with a ceremony, but with a simple conversation in which he was told that his official military records would now show him assigned to administrative duties at various bases around the world. In reality, he would be deployed wherever and whenever his unique abilities were needed to accomplish missions that couldn't be trusted to conventional forces. The transformation was complete. Marcus Chen, the quiet kid from Montana, no longer existed in any meaningful sense. In his place stood an operator who would soon earn a reputation that would spread throughout the global special operations community, known only by his call sign and the almost supernatural precision of his work. The legend of the Ghost Shooter was about to begin. The call came at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning in March. Marcus had been stationed at what his records showed as a communications facility in Germany, but was actually a staging area for operations that officially never happened. The voice on the encrypted phone was calm and professional. "Ghost, you're needed in Sector 7. Transportation leaves in 30 minutes. Marcus had earned the call sign Ghost during his final training exercise, when he had successfully infiltrated a mock enemy compound, eliminated 3 high-value targets, and exfiltrated without any of the dozens of security personnel even knowing he had been there. The name stuck because of his ability to appear and disappear from operational areas as if he had never existed. The transportation turned out to be a modified C-130 that flew without transponders or flight plans, following routes that avoided all commercial air traffic and most military radar coverage. During the 8-hour flight, Marcus studied the mission briefing materials that painted a picture of a situation that had spiraled beyond the capabilities of conventional special operations forces. Deep in the mountains of Afghanistan, a joint CIA Special Forces operation had gone catastrophically wrong. A team investigating reports of a high-value terrorist meeting had been ambushed and was now trapped in a remote compound surrounded by an estimated 40 to 60 enemy fighters who had the advantage of superior numbers, knowledge of the terrain, and heavy weapons that made any conventional rescue attempt virtually suicidal. The trapped team included 2 CIA operatives who possessed information critical to ongoing counterterrorism operations throughout the region. Their capture would not only result in the torture and execution of valuable intelligence assets, but would also compromise operations that had taken years to develop and put hundreds of other operatives at risk throughout Central Asia. Previous attempts to reach the trap team had failed disastrously. A helicopter assault had been turned back by heavy anti-aircraft fire that had damaged 2 aircraft and wounded several crew members. A ground assault by a reinforced Special Forces company had been stopped by carefully prepared defensive positions, and resulted in multiple casualties, without even reaching the outer perimeter of the enemy position. The mission briefing made it clear that Ghost was being sent in not to attempt another conventional rescue, but to eliminate enough of the enemy force to create an opportunity for the trapped team to escape on their own. The enemy commander was a former Soviet Spetsnaz officer who had decades of experience in mountain warfare and had chosen his defensive positions with the skill of a master tactician. Marcus would be inserted alone, 12 kilometers from the target compound, in terrain that was so rugged and heavily defended that it was considered impossible for a single operator to traverse undetected. His mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. Eliminate the enemy leadership and enough of their fighters to break the siege, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The insertion went flawlessly, with Marcus parachuting from high altitude during a moonless night and landing in a rocky valley that provided concealment from enemy observation posts. His gear had been carefully selected for the mission: a custom rifle system that could accurately engage targets at extreme range, specialized ammunition that had been hand-loaded for the specific atmospheric conditions he would encounter, and survival equipment that would allow him to operate independently for up to 2 weeks if necessary. Marcus spent the first 18 hours of the mission moving toward the target area, traveling only during periods of limited visibility and remaining hidden during daylight hours. His route took him through terrain that would have challenged experienced mountaineers, but his training had prepared him for exactly this type of environment. He moved like a predator, instinctively choosing paths that provided concealment while avoiding the areas where the enemy had positioned their security outposts. As he approached the target compound, Marcus began to understand why previous rescue attempts had failed so completely. The enemy commander had chosen his position perfectly, establishing his headquarters in a fortress-like structure that provided commanding views of all the surrounding valleys while being protected from direct assault by steep cliffs and carefully prepared killing zones that would channel any attacking force into predetermined ambush sites. The trapped American team was being held in a structure at the center of the compound, surrounded by multiple defensive positions that had been constructed with obvious expertise. The enemy had positioned their heavy weapons to provide overlapping fields of fire that would make any rescue attempt extremely costly, if not impossible. Worse, they had positioned sharpshooters in elevated positions that could engage targets at ranges that would make it difficult for conventional forces to suppress them. Marcus spent 2 full days conducting detailed surveillance of the enemy positions, mapping out patrol routes, identifying key leaders, and looking for weaknesses in the defensive plan. His patience and methodical approach revealed patterns that would have been invisible to a hasty reconnaissance. He identified the enemy commander, a tall man with distinctive scarring who moved through the compound with the confidence of someone who had never been successfully challenged in his chosen environment. The plan that Marcus developed was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than attempting to fight his way through the defensive positions, he would eliminate the enemy leadership through precision long-range engagements that would appear to come from multiple directions, creating confusion and panic that would provide the trapped Americans with an opportunity to escape during the resulting chaos. His first shot came at dawn on the 4th day of the mission, as the enemy commander emerged from the main building to conduct his morning inspection of the defensive positions. Marcus had positioned himself on a ridge nearly 1,400 meters from the compound, a range that most military snipers would consider extremely challenging, even under ideal conditions. The morning air was still, with visibility that allowed him to clearly see his target through his scope. The shot required calculations that took into account not just the distance and wind conditions, but also the altitude, temperature, and humidity that would affect the bullet's trajectory over such an extended flight path. Marcus made the calculations instinctively, his training having developed his natural abilities to the point where complex ballistic mathematics happened at a subconscious level. The bullet struck the enemy commander's center mass as he stood discussing positions with his subordinates. The man dropped instantly, his death so sudden and unexpected that it took several seconds for his men to realize what had happened. By the time they began searching for the source of the shot, Marcus had already displaced to a different position and was preparing for his next engagement. His second shot came 20 minutes later from a position nearly 800 meters away from his first firing position. One of the enemy's heavy weapons teams was attempting to set up their machine gun to cover what they thought might be the sniper's escape route. Marcus's bullet eliminated the gunner at the moment he was adjusting his weapon, creating the impression that the Americans were receiving fire support from multiple hidden positions. The psychological effect of the precise, seemingly impossible shots was immediate and devastating to enemy morale. The carefully disciplined defensive positions began to show signs of confusion as fighters looked nervously toward the surrounding ridgelines, unable to determine where the next shot might come from. The death of their commander had removed the tactical leadership that was holding the defensive plan together, and the mysterious sniper fire was creating a level of fear that was undermining their willingness to maintain exposed positions. Marcus continued his methodical elimination of key targets throughout the morning, displacing between shots and choosing targets that would have the maximum impact on the enemy's ability to maintain their siege. He eliminated the secondary leaders who were attempting to restore order, the weapons specialists who were operating the heavy machine guns that commanded the key escape routes, and the communications personnel who were trying to coordinate with reinforcements that were reportedly moving toward the area. Each shot was taken from a different position, at a different range, and under different conditions, creating the impression that the compound was under attack by a large, well-equipped sniper team rather than a single operator. The enemy fighters became increasingly reluctant to expose themselves, abandoning many of their key positions and consolidating in areas that provided better overhead cover, but offered poor fields of fire to prevent an escape attempt. By midday, the siege had effectively collapsed. The trapped Americans, recognizing that their captors were distracted and demoralized, executed their own escape plan with the kind of precision that only comes from extensive training and desperate motivation. They overpowered their guards, secured weapons from the compound's armory, and began fighting their way toward the extraction point that had been pre-positioned for exactly this type of emergency. Marcus provided overwatch for the escape, eliminating any enemy fighters who attempted to pursue the fleeing Americans and ensuring that they reached the extraction zone without sustaining casualties. His final shot of the mission came as an enemy fighter attempted to engage the extraction helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade. The bullet struck the fighter at the moment he was sighting his weapon, sending the RPG sailing harmlessly over the aircraft and into the mountainside. The extraction helicopter lifted off with all personnel accounted for, disappearing into the mountains while enemy reinforcements were still trying to understand what had happened to their carefully planned ambush. Marcus remained in position for another 6 hours, monitoring enemy communications and ensuring that no pursuit was being organized, before beginning his own exfiltration from the area. His extraction took place 3 days later at a different location, by a different aircraft, with no connection to the helicopter that had rescued the trapped Americans. As far as any official records were concerned, the rescue had been accomplished by the trapped team's own initiative and training, with no outside assistance. The enemy casualties were attributed to fighting during the escape attempt, with no mention of the mysterious sniper fire that had actually made the escape possible. The debriefing took place in the same unmarked building where Marcus had first been assigned to his special program. The officers who conducted the debrief were impressed not just with the mission's success, but with the way Marcus had adapted his tactics to create maximum psychological impact while remaining completely undetected throughout the operation. The mission had demonstrated that the theories behind Marcus's training program were more than just theories. They could produce operational results that went far beyond what conventional special operations could accomplish. A single operator with the right skills and training could accomplish missions that would normally require significant conventional forces and result in much higher casualties. Word of the successful mission spread quietly through the special operations community, though the details remained classified at the highest levels. Among the small group of people who knew what had actually happened in the Afghan mountains, Marcus Chen's reputation began to take on an almost mythical quality. The quiet kid from Montana had become something that existed more in whispered rumors than official records, an operator who could appear anywhere, eliminate any target, and disappear without a trace. The success of the mission also established the pattern that would define Marcus's career for the next several years. He would be deployed to situations where conventional military options had been exhausted, where the political or strategic stakes were too high to risk failure, and where the mission requirements demanded capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. His next assignment came just 6 weeks later, with a mission briefing that began with the words that Marcus would come to know well. This is a situation that requires your unique capabilities. The legend of the ghost shooter was growing, one impossible mission at a time, and Marcus Chen was becoming a weapon that existed in the shadows of the global war on terror. The people who sent him on these missions never asked how he accomplished the impossible. They simply gave him the target and waited for the confirmation that the mission was complete. In the world of special operations, results were what mattered, and Marcus consistently delivered results that defied explanation but never disappointed his commanders. As Marcus prepared for his next deployment, he reflected on how far he had traveled from his family's hunting lodge in Montana. The skills his grandfather had taught him in the peaceful mountains of Big Sky Country were now being used in the most dangerous places on Earth. But the fundamental principles remained the same: patience, precision, and the ability to become one with the environment around him. The legend of the Ghost Shooter was just beginning, and each mission would add another chapter to a story that would eventually spread throughout the global special operations community, inspiring awe among allies and fear among enemies, who began to realize that somewhere in the shadows, there was an operator who could reach out and touch them no matter where they tried to hide. 3 years into his shadow career, Marcus had completed 17 missions that officially never happened. His reputation had grown to the point where enemy forces in multiple theaters of operation had begun adapting their tactics specifically to counter the legendary Ghost Shooter they believed was hunting them. What they didn't realize was that their countermeasures would soon be put to the ultimate test. The mission briefing took place in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, attended by officials whose presence indicated that something extraordinary was at stake. The target was Dmitry Volkov, a former Russian Spetsnaz colonel who had become one of the world's most dangerous arms dealers. Volkov wasn't just selling conventional weapons. Intelligence indicated that he was preparing to auction a stolen nuclear device to the highest bidder among several terrorist organizations. What made Volkov particularly dangerous was his intimate knowledge of special operations tactics, gained through decades of experience and, according to classified reports, detailed study of American special operations missions that had been leaked through various intelligence compromises. He had specifically prepared defenses against the kind of long-range precision operations that had become Marcus's signature. Volkov had established his headquarters in a former Soviet missile facility in the mountains of Chechnya, surrounded by a security force composed entirely of former special operations personnel from various countries. These weren't typical mercenaries or local fighters. They were professionals who understood exactly the kind of threat they were defending against and had prepared accordingly. The mission parameters were unlike anything Marcus had encountered before. Volkov's security team included several former military snipers who had positioned themselves at extreme ranges around the facility, specifically tasked with hunting any operator who might attempt the kind of long-range engagement that had made the Ghost Shooter legendary. The facility itself was designed to be impossible to penetrate undetected, with overlapping sensor systems and patrol patterns that had been developed by experts who understood modern stealth technology. Intelligence reports indicated that Volkov himself was aware of the Ghost Shooter's reputation and had publicly stated that he looked forward to the challenge of facing America's legendary sniper. He had reportedly told his security team that the American operator's previous successes had come against inferior opponents and that he would demonstrate how easily such tactics could be countered by competent professionals. The insertion for this mission took place during a winter storm that provided concealment but also created operational challenges that pushed Marcus's training to its limits. He was deployed by submarine off the coast of Russia, then transported by a combination of specialized vehicles and careful movement through hostile territory that took nearly 2 weeks to reach the operational area. The approach to Volkov's facility revealed the extent of the defenses that had been prepared specifically to counter Marcus's tactics. The enemy had positioned counter-snipers at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters from the facility, armed with the most advanced rifle systems available and equipped with detection equipment that could identify the signature of a scope lens or the muzzle flash of a suppressed rifle from enormous distances. The defensive positions had been carefully sited to eliminate the kind of concealed firing positions that Marcus typically used, forcing any potential sniper to either accept extremely long-range shots under difficult conditions or move close enough to the facility to be detected by the extensive security systems. The enemy had essentially created a tactical puzzle that seemed to have no solution. Marcus spent a full week conducting surveillance of the enemy positions, looking for weaknesses in a defensive plan that had obviously been designed by someone with extensive knowledge of sniper tactics. The counter-snipers rotated positions on irregular schedules, used decoy positions to confuse potential threats, and maintained constant communication with a central command post that coordinated their activities with mobile patrols and electronic surveillance systems. What the enemy defenders didn't understand was that Marcus's training had prepared him for exactly this type of challenge. His instructors had warned him that his reputation would eventually attract the attention of opponents who would specifically prepare to counter his tactics, and they had taught him advanced techniques that went far beyond conventional sniper doctrine. The solution Marcus developed was so audacious that it would later be studied in advanced military academies as an example of how superior training and unconventional thinking could overcome seemingly impossible tactical problems. Rather than attempting to engage the enemy from the kind of hidden positions they were expecting, he decided to use their own defensive preparations against them. Marcus identified that the enemy counter-snipers were positioned to cover all the likely firing positions within a certain range of the facility, but their defensive plan assumed that any attacking sniper would follow conventional doctrine and attempt to remain undetected until after taking his shot. By making himself visible to the enemy detection systems, Marcus could draw their counter-snipers into engaging him from positions that would then expose them to return fire from unexpected angles. The execution of this plan required precise timing and nerves that had been forged through years of operating in the most dangerous environments on Earth. Marcus deliberately exposed himself to enemy surveillance at a range of nearly 3,000 meters from the facility, carrying equipment that was designed to create the electronic signature of standard military sniper systems. The enemy response was immediate and massive. 3 separate counter-sniper teams engaged what they believed was the legendary Ghost Shooter, firing from carefully prepared positions that should have guaranteed their success. What they didn't realize was that Marcus had positioned himself in a location that provided concealment from their firing positions, while appearing exposed to their surveillance systems. As the enemy snipers revealed their positions by engaging what they thought was their target, Marcus systematically eliminated them using techniques that pushed his abilities to their absolute limits. His first shot traveled over 3,100 meters through variable wind conditions, eliminating a counter-sniper who had just fired what he believed was a killing shot on the Ghost Shooter. The second shot was taken less than 30 seconds later, from a different position, eliminating another counter-sniper who was attempting to confirm the kill on the first target. The third shot came from yet another angle, eliminating the final member of the counter-sniper team and creating complete confusion among the remaining defenders. The psychological impact of the impossible shots was even more devastating than Marcus had anticipated. The enemy security force had been specifically trained and equipped to counter the Ghost Shooter's tactics, and their failure to stop him despite their extensive preparations created a level of fear that undermined their entire defensive plan. Reports intercepted from their communications indicated that some of the defenders believed they were facing a supernatural threat that could not be stopped by conventional means. With the counter-sniper threat eliminated, Marcus was able to move closer to the facility and begin engaging targets that would create the conditions necessary for the final phase of his mission. He systematically eliminated the leaders of the security force, the operators of the electronic surveillance systems, and the crews of the heavy weapons that commanded the approaches to the main facility. Each engagement was conducted from a different position, using different techniques, and under different conditions, maintaining the impression that the facility was under attack by a large, highly skilled force rather than a single operator. The enemy's communication discipline began to break down as reports of impossible shots and mysterious disappearances created an atmosphere of panic that spread throughout the defensive force. The final phase of the mission required Marcus to penetrate the main facility itself, where Volkov was reportedly hiding in a heavily fortified command bunker that had been designed to withstand direct assault by conventional forces. Intelligence indicated that the nuclear device was stored in the same bunker, along with the documentation that would identify the potential buyers and their planned delivery methods. The approach to the main facility was complicated by defensive systems that included motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, and automated weapon systems that had been positioned to eliminate any potential infiltrator. Marcus used techniques that had been taught by instructors whose names appeared in no official records, moving through the defensive perimeter with such skill that the electronic systems registered no more disturbance than might be caused by a small animal moving through the area. Inside the facility, Marcus encountered the most sophisticated security measures he had ever faced. The corridors were monitored by overlapping camera systems. The floors were equipped with pressure sensors that could detect the weight of a human footstep, and the air filtration system had been modified to detect the chemical signature of standard military equipment and explosive devices. Moving through this environment required Marcus to use every technique he had learned during his specialized training, plus several improvisations that demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility that separated truly elite operators from merely skilled soldiers. He avoided the sensor systems not by defeating them, but by understanding their limitations and moving in ways that exploited the small gaps in their coverage. The confrontation with Volkov took place in the command bunker, a reinforced chamber that the arms dealer had designed as his ultimate refuge. Volkov was waiting with a pistol in his hand and a confident smile on his face, clearly believing that his preparations had been adequate to handle whatever threat the Americans might send against him. "So you are the famous ghost shooter," Volkov said in accented but fluent English. "I have studied your methods extensively. You are skilled, but you are not supernatural. You bleed like any other man." Marcus said nothing, recognizing that his opponent was attempting to create psychological pressure that might cause him to make a mistake. His training had prepared him for this type of confrontation, teaching him to remain calm and focused regardless of what psychological games his opponents might attempt to play. The engagement lasted less than 3 seconds, ending with Volkov on the floor and Marcus securing both the nuclear device and the intelligence materials that would identify the entire network of potential buyers and sellers. The mission that conventional forces would have considered impossible had been completed with no American casualties and minimal collateral damage. The exfiltration from the facility was complicated by the arrival of Russian military units that had been alerted by the breakdown in communications from Volkov's security force. Marcus was forced to improvise an escape route that took him through terrain that would have challenged experienced mountain climbers, while carrying equipment that included components of the nuclear device that had to be transported intact for analysis by American scientists. The journey to the extraction point took 4 days, during which Marcus was pursued by special operations units from multiple countries who had been tasked with recovering the stolen nuclear device. His route took him through some of the most difficult terrain in the Caucasus Mountains, in weather conditions that claimed the lives of several of his pursuers and forced others to abandon the search. The extraction itself was accomplished by a stealth helicopter that operated without any official flight plans or radio communications, appearing at the designated coordinates for exactly the amount of time necessary to recover Marcus and his precious cargo before disappearing back into the storm that had provided concealment for the entire operation. The debriefing for this mission took place at the highest levels of government, with officials who normally dealt with matters of national policy rather than tactical operations. The successful recovery of the nuclear device had prevented what could have been a catastrophic terrorist attack, while the intelligence materials provided information that led to the disruption of arms-dealing networks in dozens of countries. More importantly for Marcus's career, the mission had demonstrated that his abilities could overcome even the most sophisticated countermeasures when applied with proper planning and tactical flexibility. The enemy had specifically prepared to counter his known methods, but his training had provided him with capabilities that went far beyond what his reputation suggested. Word of the successful mission spread through intelligence circles around the world, creating a legend that would grow with each telling. The ghost shooter had faced his most dangerous challenge and emerged victorious, proving that some warriors transcend the normal limitations of human capability through a combination of natural talent, intensive training, and the kind of mental strength that allows them to perform under the most extreme pressure. As Marcus prepared for his next assignment, he reflected on how the mission had changed his understanding of his own capabilities. He had always known that his training was extraordinary, but facing opponents who had specifically prepared to counter his methods had revealed depths of skill and tactical flexibility that even he had not fully appreciated. The legend of the ghost shooter had evolved from stories of remarkable marksmanship to accounts of an operator who could overcome any defense and complete any mission regardless of the obstacles placed in his path. In the shadowy world of special operations, Marcus Chen had become something approaching a force of nature, predictable only in his ability to accomplish the impossible. 5 years had passed since Marcus first earned his call sign, and the ghost shooter had become more legend than man, in the minds of both allies and enemies. His official military record still showed him assigned to administrative duties at various bases around the world, while in reality he had completed missions on 6 continents that had shaped the course of global security in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. The call that would define the rest of Marcus's career came on a quiet evening in October. He had been temporarily stationed at a communications facility in Turkey, officially conducting routine maintenance on classified equipment, when the encrypted phone delivered a message that was different from any he had received before. "Ghost, you're needed at home. This one's personal." The briefing took place in the same unmarked building in Coronado where Marcus's journey into the shadows had begun years earlier. The officials present included the highest-ranking members of the Special Operations community, plus several individuals whose presence indicated that this mission had implications far beyond normal national security concerns. The target was General Patricia Morrison, a decorated Army officer who had served with distinction in multiple theaters of operation before being assigned to oversee special operations training and doctrine development. What the briefing revealed was that Morrison had been systematically selling classified information about American special operations capabilities to foreign intelligence services for over 3 years. The intelligence that Morrison had compromised included detailed information about the Ghost Shooter program, Marcus's training methods, and the tactical innovations that had made his impossible missions successful. Worse, she had provided foreign agents with enough information to develop countermeasures that would neutralize not just Marcus's capabilities, but those of the entire next generation of special operations personnel who were being trained using similar methods. Morrison's betrayal had already resulted in the failure of several classified operations and the deaths of American personnel who had been sent into situations where the enemy had been provided with detailed intelligence about their capabilities and tactics. Intelligence analysts estimated that her treachery had compromised operations worth billions of dollars and had set back American special operations capabilities by decades. What made Morrison particularly dangerous was her intimate knowledge of Marcus's identity, training, and operational methods. She had access to classified files that contained details about his missions that could be used to expose him to retaliation from enemies around the world who had lost personnel to his operations. If she managed to defect to a hostile nation, the intelligence she possessed could be used to hunt down and eliminate not just Marcus, but dozens of other special operations personnel whose identities she knew. The mission parameters were unlike anything Marcus had encountered in his career. Morrison was scheduled to attend a classified conference at a secure military facility in Virginia, where intelligence indicated she was planning to make contact with foreign agents who would facilitate her defection. The conference was being held at a location that was protected by multiple layers of security, attended by hundreds of military and intelligence personnel, and monitored by some of the most sophisticated surveillance systems in the American defense establishment. Marcus would have to infiltrate an American military facility, eliminate a high-ranking American officer, and exfiltrate without compromising any of the other personnel or operations associated with the conference. The mission required him to operate against his own countrymen, in an environment where his usual tactics would be useless, and where a single mistake could expose the entire Ghost Shooter program to public scrutiny. The psychological challenge of the mission was as difficult as the tactical requirements. Morrison wasn't an enemy combatant or a foreign terrorist. She was an American officer who had sworn the same oath that Marcus had taken when he first enlisted. The briefing officers made it clear that her betrayal had crossed lines that made her as dangerous to American interests as any foreign enemy. But Marcus still struggled with the reality of what he was being asked to do. The approach to the target required Marcus to essentially infiltrate his own military, using credentials and cover identities that had been carefully prepared to get him inside the secure conference facility. His legend for the mission identified him as a communications specialist who was responsible for maintaining the encrypted systems that would be used during the conference sessions. The facility itself was located on a military base that Marcus had visited several times during his career, but the conference was being held in a section that had been specially secured for the event. Getting inside required him to pass through multiple security checkpoints, each staffed by personnel who had been specifically trained to identify potential threats to the high-value attendees. Marcus's preparation for the mission included studying the personal backgrounds and behavioral patterns of hundreds of military and intelligence personnel who would be attending the conference, allowing him to blend in with the crowd of legitimate participants while moving toward his target. The cover identity he assumed was so detailed that it included fabricated personal relationships with other attendees and a complete professional history that would withstand scrutiny by security personnel. The first 2 days of the conference proceeded without incident, as Marcus established his cover and began tracking Morrison's movements and security arrangements. What he discovered was that the general was indeed planning to defect, but her preparations were more sophisticated than the intelligence briefing had suggested. She was using the conference as cover for meetings with multiple foreign agents, and her planned defection included contingencies that would allow her to disappear from American custody even if her initial escape plan was discovered. Morrison's security detail included personnel who had been specially selected for their loyalty to her personally rather than to the mission of protecting classified information. Intelligence intercepts suggested that several members of her security team were aware of her planned defection and were prepared to assist her escape in exchange for substantial financial compensation and new identities in foreign countries. The complexity of the situation required Marcus to develop a plan that would eliminate not just Morrison, but also the foreign agents she was planning to meet, and any members of her security detail who were complicit in the betrayal. The mission had evolved from a simple assassination to a complex counterintelligence operation that would require precise timing and multiple contingencies. Marcus's solution was to use the conference's own security protocols against his targets. The facility's emergency procedures called for immediate lockdown and evacuation in the event of a security breach, which would separate Morrison from her loyal security personnel and create opportunities for Marcus to eliminate her and her foreign contacts during the confusion that would follow. The execution began during the third day of the conference, when Marcus triggered a series of security alerts that created the appearance of a serious but non-specific threat to the facility. The emergency protocols were activated automatically, dividing the conference attendees into groups that were evacuated to different secure areas, while security personnel searched for the source of the threat. During the evacuation, Marcus eliminated the first foreign agent, a man who had been posing as a military contractor, but whose background check revealed connections to Russian intelligence services. The elimination was accomplished using techniques that made the death appear to be the result of a medical emergency, brought on by the stress of the evacuation. The second target was eliminated in a secure communications room, where Morrison was attempting to contact her foreign handlers to accelerate her escape plan. The agent, who had been posing as a civilian analyst, was discovered dead at his workstation, with no obvious signs of violence, his death attributed to a heart attack that appeared to have been brought on by the pressure of the emergency situation. Morrison herself presented the most complex challenge, as she was surrounded by loyal security personnel and was attempting to use the confusion of the evacuation to escape from the facility. Marcus tracked her through the secure corridors of the facility, waiting for the opportunity to separate her from her protection detail without compromising any innocent personnel. The opportunity came when Morrison attempted to reach a secure vehicle that had been pre-positioned for her escape. Marcus intercepted her in an underground parking garage, away from surveillance cameras and potential witnesses, in a confrontation that lasted less than 30 seconds but required every technique he had learned during years of training. Morrison was armed and accompanied by 2 security personnel who were clearly prepared to kill anyone who attempted to interfere with her escape. The engagement required Marcus to eliminate all 3 targets simultaneously, using a combination of marksmanship and close-quarters combat skills that demonstrated the full range of his capabilities. The aftermath of the incident was carefully managed to protect the security of the Ghost Shooter program, while ensuring that Morrison's treachery was exposed in a way that would deter other potential traitors. Her death was attributed to a terrorist attack that had been thwarted by security personnel, with the foreign agents' deaths explained as casualties of the same incident. The intelligence materials that Morrison had been carrying were recovered and used to identify and neutralize the foreign intelligence network she had been working with, resulting in the arrest or elimination of dozens of enemy agents around the world. More importantly, the countermeasures that had been developed using her intelligence were identified and neutralized, protecting the operational security of American Special Operations Forces worldwide. The debriefing for this mission was conducted by officials who normally dealt with matters of national policy rather than tactical operations. The successful elimination of Morrison and her network had prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence compromise, while the recovery of her materials had provided information that significantly enhanced American counterintelligence capabilities. For Marcus, the mission marked a turning point in his career and his understanding of the responsibilities that came with his extraordinary abilities. He had been forced to confront the reality that his skills might be needed against American citizens who had betrayed their oath and their country, a possibility that his training had prepared him for, intellectually, but that he had hoped never to face in practice. The success of the mission also demonstrated that the Ghost Shooter program had achieved its original objectives, creating operators who could accomplish missions that conventional special operations forces could not attempt. Marcus had become a strategic asset whose capabilities transcended normal military categories, able to operate against any threat regardless of its source or the complexity of the environment. As word of the successful mission spread through the highest levels of the intelligence community, Marcus's reputation evolved from that of an exceptional sniper to something approaching a force of nature. He had proven that properly trained and equipped operators could overcome any threat, complete any mission, and maintain operational security even under the most challenging circumstances. The mission also marked the beginning of a new phase in Marcus's career, as senior officials began to recognize that his abilities represented a strategic capability that could be used to address threats that went far beyond conventional military targets. The quiet kid from Montana had become a weapon that existed in the shadows of American foreign policy, available to eliminate threats that could not be addressed through conventional diplomatic or military means. Years later, when military historians attempted to analyze the most significant special operations missions of the early 21st century, they would find gaps in the official records where the Ghost Shooter's missions should have been documented. The legend would persist in whispered conversations among special operations personnel, stories of an operator who could appear anywhere, eliminate any target, and disappear without leaving any trace of his presence. Marcus Chen continued to serve his country for several more years, completing missions that shaped the course of global events in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. When he finally retired from active service, he returned to the mountains of Montana, where he established a small hunting lodge that catered to clients who appreciated the kind of marksmanship instruction that only a true master could provide. The Ghost Shooter had become a legend that would inspire future generations of special operations personnel, proving that with the right combination of natural talent, intensive training, and unwavering dedication to duty, it was possible to accomplish missions that others would consider impossible. In the community of warriors who operated in the shadows of global conflict, Marcus Chen had earned a place among the immortals, remembered not for his rank or his decorations, but for his ability to accomplish the impossible when his country needed it most. To this day, when young SEALs complete their training and join the teams, they hear whispered stories of the Ghost Shooter, the operator who had no rank and no name, but whom every SEAL saluted out of respect for what he had accomplished in service to his country. The legend continues to inspire those who follow in his footsteps, proving that true warriors are measured not by their official recognition, but by their willingness to serve in the shadows when their nation calls upon them to do the impossible.